live at the door. All right. All right, you're good. You go inside.
Morning, everyone. I have two lovely folks here. I've been trying to, since basically there's the ecosystem of like DOI. There's been a lot of like wild stuff that's happened on over the course of a couple of years on the record label side, and I haven't had the chance really to talk to record labels about their ethos and things like that. And so I actually am very lucky that I have PNWK Records, Robert and Sam joining me today. Say hello, everybody.
Hello. So much for having us.
Howdy.
Yeah, this is really, really cool to have y'all. Basically, I would say like a lot of, just to get right into it, I would say record label wise, y'all have made kind of the most news, I'd say over the last year or so, with, the big sponsoring, or whatever you guys want to call it with the Excellency Fest. The things that happened with Thumbs Up Records, kind of the super groups that you've been pulling in, from M-Way to even Cascade Riot, and Tiny Voices and everything like that. It's been kind of a crazy year. How is everybody feeling?
Oh man, we are feeling incredible. Like as you noted, we are a fairly young label in the grand scheme of things. Now, people who work with us and have talked to us know that, generally we've been doing this for a while in terms of like creative projects. And, I had a record label in the 90s, but, PNWK is a fresh thing. And honestly, the response that we've received in the last couple years has been incredible. I honestly feel so blessed, so grateful that we've been able to somehow just fall in love with bands that are at the perfect spot in their trajectory, that everybody is starting to realize what we realized. And that has been extremely fortunate. And honestly, like, man, our roster right now is literally our favorite bands. And that has blown our minds.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, and to kind of reinforce and reiterate what Robert said, going into this in terms of a fresh label into the scene, we didn't really compare ourselves to any of our contemporaries, whether they're at our level or higher levels in terms of visibility. We just went into it with an open mind and a pure heart, as corny as that sounds. And we just did things our own way. And the response is exactly what we'd hoped it would be. We put our hearts out there. We put our hands out there and lend a helping hand to a lot of these bands that do need that help. And it's been great. So it's really validating that, our vision and our heart is exactly in the right place.
I love that. I think that, the mission statement is kind of bared for everyone to see. Like, this is, I like that the distance between you deciding, not only to start the label, but to decide your roster is basically like, well, I like them. I want this band I like to be on the label. And like, that's kind of just it.
Yeah, it really is. And it sounds stupidly simple. But like the reality is like our metric is like, do we love you? Right. And we use the word love a lot because that's literally what drives everything that we do, because we are not here to make money. Like, we do not take money from our bands. We do not give them loans that they have to pay back. Like, we just cover the cost because we want these bands to exist because we personally enjoy them. So essentially, if your music ends up on repeat around our house, in our car, through our daily lives, and you are at a point where you need some assistance, you're going to end up talking to us at some point because we are not shy about reaching out and telling people or showing up to a show and saying like, we love what you're doing. How can we help you keep doing it? And that sort of approach to A&R and discovery has worked out really, really well.
Yeah, the concept of A&R in itself is kind of like, I feel like A&R is a little bit easier in a world like, okay, there's a lot of ways to pitch that streaming is bad. There's a lot of ways to say that like the modern music industry, there's a lot of negative stuff. But it's more interesting to say like some positive stuff, which would be that A&R is kind of a little bit easier. You don't have to go to shows all the time. You can just like, listen to tons of playlists and find stuff that you like. And I feel like maybe that's an interesting way of looking at like the positivity of streaming. What is something that y'all, what perks y'all's ears when it comes to like, oh man, I love this stuff. Is there something about like this modern DIY scene that has been just like, it feels like it's just a grab bag of good bands?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of really touches on a lot of elements of the music I listened to growing up. Like, I will admit, I am a quote unquote elder emo. I love drive-through records bands, and a lot of the sound and the lyricism just really resonates with me. And I see a lot of that reflected in the music scene today. And that's the thing that energizes me. Like it makes me feel those same feelings as an angsty youth. And I just see a whole slew of people just like me emerging from the scene today that, one day they'll be running a PNWK or something like that. And that's what really kind of gets me excited, is like this positive cycle of like this really cool DIY music scene that has the heart that just kind of keeps on going.
Yeah, there's something kind of amazing, I would say, over the last like 2 years, specifically. Maybe it's just the Twitter community, or maybe it's I would say leaning more into what this Twitter community is, where it feels like it's, maybe like 4,000 people in total that are all created this bubble of like sharing and posting and kind of reply guying who these good bands are. And it's been kind of democratized they've been picking out, oh, suddenly, excuse me, who are you? Everyone has decided that, that is the next thing. And is it good? Yes, it's objectively good. Leisure Hour, objectively good. I feel like there's been this fantastic, like, group thought project that has been around in these communities that have lifted these bands up. And I think that on like, how lucky is it for it to be a label where you get to see that happening, and then you also get to pitch via this like weird groupthink A&R moment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what you're describing is the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the 90s, when I had my first label, those scenes were a bunch of like microchasms around the country, right? It's like, I grew up in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky punk scene, and we were very small, but we merged a lot with the Chicago scene because a lot of tours would just take you up to Chicago and back down again. And so, now our scene is digital, but one thing that I've noticed about the scene today online is, while you do have that democracy voice of like, hey, what are we loving, what are we vibing with, what do we all love, and like it's all feeding off each other, there's not a sense of gatekeeping that I felt used to exist in the 90s. Like in the 90s, you definitely had a little bit of that, like, oh, like the pop punk people don't want to mix with the hardcore people, and the hardcore people don't want to mix with the screamo people because it felt like fake hardcore. And there were all these like pretentious made up rules about where you belonged within your general scene. And I always hated that. Like it always just like made me feel wrong, because it's like, because I never really identified with a specific sub scene. I was always just like, I love punk music. And to me, punk is a wide spectrum. And I kind of love things on all ends of the spectrum. And nowadays, in the current scene, because of the digital nature of it, I think it's a lot more welcoming and blended. And I love that. And that's really why, if you look at PNWK, we advertise ourselves as an alt emo punk rock label.
Mhm.
Like, to me, that is our spectrum of where we fit in. And that's still a very wide spectrum within this scene. And that's why you can have something like Motion Sick, which is a very fun, very, unapologetically pop punk band,
Mhm.
as well as somebody as awesome as Imwe, right?
Mhm.
And they can coexist on the same label and in the same scene and really feed off of each other in what I think is an incredibly cool way.
I find it admirable in that through that lens. Like I find that one of everyone kind of wants to be I'm an old head. I'm 37. I look at this whole thing or sometimes through the lens of like kind of the movie High Fidelity, where there's it used to be glorified as glorification of gatekeepiness was a positive thing back then. I think that I'm not sure why there's something attractive about being gatekeepy. I think it's a way to show I know more, and maybe back then maybe it's because of the internet allows you to know everything. Being gatekeeping meant that you went to the shows and you knew all these bands and you bought the records and the CDs, and it was kind of a trophy to say that, like, oh well, I know them and you don't, so because I actually have most of those bands were small and weird and it was hard to learn about them, and because that was like during zine time anyways. And so
it took a lot of effort to build that lore for somebody, so they felt protective of it because it took so much effort.
exactly. Like there's a reason I think that, like, not to come in defense, I think it's coming to defense of like gatekeepiness back then, which wasn't great, but it had a purpose. But there's just no room for it anymore because of, and I think that's why like even the phrase DIY emo is kind of, or just emo in itself, it's kind of going away, and it's now just like this. It went from emo to DIY emo, and now it's just kind of DIY, and it's just bringing in more and more and more stuff. Like kind of how, your label breaks down. Like, again, Motion Sick and Potion Seller, they get a little bit closer, and then you got Tiny Voices, which gets a little bit further away. RB Amphibians, like, your roster kind of shows like the landscape. With that, like, is there some hardcore missing? Sure, but like y'all are really starting to like become just like this larger and larger umbrella of like what the scene is now and what it means to be involved in it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, because it's very validating. Because the funny thing is, like, we're just kind of doing our own thing, and we're really doing it in what seems to us to be a very small bubble. Because I don't know if people know, but like we are in Bellevue, Washington. Like we are just outside of Seattle. Yet our biggest influence in the majority of our roster is in the Midwest, besides
Yes.
Aren't We Amphibians, which is in San Diego. But so it's so funny because we're kind of like physically outside the scene. So we're not influenced in the same way that people who are deeply rooted physically in the scene are. And it sort of gives us an objective way to just sort of look at everything holistically and sort of make decisions unbiased by anything but our raw feelings and emotion. And I say that only because then when we get feedback from people, whether it's fans at shows or online people, people joining our street team, like right now our street team is blowing up, which, by the way, side note, I'm just so stoked to even be bringing back like that authentic street team community. Because it was so core to my development growing up in the scene. Like I was somebody like back with my original label and even bands that I loved, like I loved activating for people that I loved, right? Like I loved going around town, like flyer blasting whatever wall I could come across, making sure every record shop, every skate park had the flyers up, that stickers were bombed everywhere. Like that was like my, like how I spent my time growing up. So bringing that back is really good. But back to my point of like hearing you say that and hearing other people sort of validate these decisions that we feel like we're kind of making in a vacuum sometimes, like feels really good, because that's the type of stuff that makes you feel connected to the community at large.
What would you say is like your dowsing rod to determine kind of like, yeah, sometimes it does feel like navigating blind, but what has been like, what do you feel has been your dowsing rod, like kind of pointing you towards your direction?
I mean, I like we had mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really just a feeling. I don't know how else we could best describe it, because for example, I haven't been on social media personally for over 2 years. So this is really just me listening to music and I'm like, hey, I like this. I'll give you a perfect example. As somebody that is not on social media, I really don't know what's happening. One day I decided to see what was happening here in Seattle. So I went on Eventbrite. Like, who does that? I don't know, maybe old people. But I decided to look up like emo or pop punk events in my local area. And this was on a Thursday afternoon. And I came across like this event, and it's like I saw like the local headliner is this like a Seattle post emo band. Went down the list. Kind of went down the list of like the headliner and some of the opening bands. And I saw there was a traveling band, and they're the last band I listened to. And I was like, I listened to it for 15 seconds, and I was like, this is it. I love this band. Showed it to Robert, and he's like, fuck yeah, like this is the band. That band is Leisure Hour. So
we had no context for Leisure Hour prior to that 15-second listen. Like
Incredible.
we were not yet exposed to them, which feels weird now because they're so ingrained in our daily lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like this was on a Thursday afternoon. The show was the next day. We were the only people that purchased tickets to that show, I think. Which was a little odd, but
it was one of those rough shows where like no shade to the headlining local act, but they did not promote it at all. We stumbled across it. Like we did not see anybody promoting it or whatever. So I feel bad because it's just one of those, any touring band is going to relate to this. It's like, you have those killer shows, and then you have those shows on the tour where it's like nobody did anything to let anybody know that it exists. So you show up and there's like 5 people standing around.
Oh, I totally get that.
Yeah. But that being said, like they played their heart out, and it was amazing. And we talked to them, and, 2 days later, they came over and had dinner at our place. And honestly, the rest is history. And we had the pleasure of meeting Emo Ethi IRL for the first time. And Ethi has been a constant in our life since then as well. And so it's just one of those very serendipitous moments that I couldn't tell you how it came about. It's not an algorithm. It's not social media. I wasn't influenced by anything. It was purely serendipity and organic search.
Yeah, but I will say, one of the things that made us decide to sign Leisure Hour was the fact that we went to that show, and it was, from a attendance standpoint, it was an odd duck because we were the only 2 paid tickets there. But what sealed it for me was the fact that we already knew we loved the music because we had been listening to it for 24 hours prior to going to that show and falling in love with their debut album. And then we went there, and despite the fact that they were basically only playing to us, and they had no context to who we are, to be clear, they were only playing to us, but you could not tell. Like, they put on a show as if that place was sold out. And that is like the type of energy and love of the game that we look for in bands, because like we're doing this because we love it. We only want to work with good people who are only doing it because they love it, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean we don't have ambitions. That doesn't mean we wouldn't all love to be paid to make music, but it's in those moments when you're not making money and you're still doing it with your full heart and you're leaning into it. That's what makes all of this matter. And we saw that night with Leisure Hour in Seattle. And then that was just, more validation of like, hey, I really want to talk to them. And the next night they were over at our house having dinner, hanging out, like, you know, laying the foundation for what became the relationship that everybody knows today.
So by that time, before, you know, hearing Leisure Hour, before signing Leisure Hour, what stage was the label at?
At that point, we had signed Potion Cellar, and we were working on their When They Get Old release.
Okay, cool.
And so When They Get Old from Potion Cellar was going to be our first, you know,
big quote unquote mainstream release.
Yeah, like a full album that we worked with the band from conception to release on.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was early.
Okay, cool. So like that was because Potion Cellar's been, you know, on the label for quite some time, despite you know, the length of everything. I was wondering if I could. You mentioned Street Team. Walk me through what you saw was missing and why you're excited to kind of bring this thing back, and what does that mean in this digital world?
Yeah, so I think that you touched on it right there at the end, right? What is missing is that organized, tangible community. And, you know, as we all know, like our local scenes exist, right? It's like, yeah, you have your group of friends that you go to shows with, and you're going to buy tickets, and you're going to go to your local DIY shows and your local venues. And like that has always existed, right? But what I have noticed that faded away between the 90s and now is this sort of like getting out there and really rallying people to support something that they're not organically supporting, right?
Yeah.
All of us who are in the scene are already organically doing it because it's our personal interest. But back in the day, like when a band goes on tour, and any touring band is going to know this, you're passing through regions and towns and playing at places that have never heard of you, have no clue that you're even coming, and have no reason to show up, right? And so the problem is, how do we still get people to that show? Because a band needs money for gas, they need money to eat, and they need to make that travel between the big cities. You know, if you're playing Chicago one night and then you're playing Cincinnati the next night, like you don't want to just go from Chicago to Cincinnati. Like if you can play a killer, you know, pretty decent turnout show in between there, that's obviously going to bolster the whole tour. And so really the question becomes like, how do we activate and rally in those areas that are not currently in our little bubble of our digital scene, right? Like how do we welcome proactively new people and expose new people to that? And that to me is where street teams come in, right? Like it's all about being evangelists and being like, hey, I love this so much and I love you, my friends. I want you to experience what I get to experience. I want you to be stoked on this. And then most importantly, the street team structure is all about rewarding that passion, right? Because there's so many times that we go on tour, we'll play all these shows, we have 6 guest passes slots available, right? That just never get filled. And I would love to fill those with people who want to see it and who have been promoting it. So it's like, listen, if you're promoting this and you're bringing 3 friends to the show that have never seen this band, you should be on the guest list. Get on the guest list with the band because you're helping them out. You brought 3 people who are hopefully going to become lifelong fans. How can we support that passion? How can we enable anybody across the country to sort of participate this in a very meaningful way? Because it might not seem a lot to bring a friend to a show, but it is. That is so meaningful because that person becomes a lifelong fan. They buy a shirt for $20, right? That $20 gets us to the next city. And then that friend might introduce another friend and another friend. And it sounds logical, but a lot of that has like faded away over the time, which is like, that's how we survived in the 90s. Like we survived from that one social butterfly friend that would bring 8 of us to a show that we never heard of. Right. And we're like, all right, we trust you, but this better not suck. And then you get there and you fall in love with this band. right? And then they become a staple in your rotation forever. And that's what I want to get back to, is like organizing. And so like right now in our street team, we're sort of like, we do it all through Discord, which is amazing, because back in the day I used to have to manage like spreadsheets and like post-it notes, like whatever. But in Discord, so we're like just asking everybody to like self-identify with like what region you go to shows in, right? Like, are you in the Midwest? Are you in like, you know, the tri-state area of like Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana? Are you in the South? Like, just identify the region that you actually go to shows, even if you have to drive a little bit, so that we can like sort of like build a structure to reward those people, right? Like send them free merch. Like if people are walking around in PNWK shirts and leisure hour stuff and M-Way hats and like Tiny Voices hoodies, like that stuff goes a long way to help us build awareness before we come touring through that area, right? Because the goal is to just make sure that more and more people are listening to our music, because that's the point, is we want to entertain people. We want people to have a good time. And the more people we can do that, the better. Street teams allow us to do that. And I feel like because digitally, it's very easy to feel like we're making an impact because we're being vocal. But if we're only being vocal to our little bubble, it doesn't have as much impact as it can. And so we're just trying to like pierce that bubble a little bit to let that enthusiasm out and let it spread, you know, wider and further into people who maybe need this music in their life and they don't even know it exists, right? Because I mean, when I grew up, Sam's very similar. We grew up on golden oldies, right? Like our parents, like they loved golden oldies. That's all they listened to around the house. Before we had the autonomy to discover our own music, it's like, that's what we listen to because that's what exists in our universe. And then that moment where you get to discover something that feels truly yourself is such a transformative personal moment. Street teams allow us to bring that to people all across the country who are currently living in a bubble that doesn't feel like their own.
So I think that the grassroots aspect of it, okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about this. One, I feel like the sine wave of the last 15 years is everything going, you know, towards the algorithmic thing. I literally did a podcast with the band Annabelle yesterday. We talked a lot about where things come from and where things are now and how everything repeats itself. And something that we all talked about how we miss, like, you know, Pure Volume and MySpace and things like that, because I think that there was a better, it didn't feel weird to discover a band. It felt like you found somebody that it was rare. You feel like you were like, finding actually a shiny object rather than it being like pushed to you through like some algorithmic playlist. Like one of the best things for me back in the day was going on Pure Volume and like there's like a button that said like find me a similar band, and it would just take you to another page of a similar band. And that's how I would find all this stuff, is everyone has like, you know, these things. And so I feel like there's this sine wave of everything went digital and then everything's going to go back to the physical. I think the return to the physical is 1,000,000%. Whoever grabs that first is going to be successful for the remainder of that sine wave push. So to hear about, you know, the street team aspect and using the digitalness to get physical people and things to places to market in that specific way is interesting and fascinating. Because I think that you know, I'm pretty sure, if I know enough of your history, that you are both of you devs, or one of you is a dev?
We both work in video game development.
Okay, cool.
I work more on the development side. where Sam traditionally works more on the publishing side, but has recently moved over to the development side.
That's awesome. Okay, so the concept of discoverability is not lost on y'all. Like that's the key word. And like discoverability, I work in so specifically to like bring some transparency to this, I work in podcast technology. And so I work for a company called Headliner, and I manage their customer support team. But my job is basically to understand the entirety of a product and then be able to help people with understanding that product. And in podcasting, one of the biggest problems is discoverability in itself. Where how do you get people to find your podcast? How do people find your thing? And so I think about that a lot when it comes to music as well. So what would you say over the next couple of years? What would you say is like what would solve discoverability? What's something that you could build? What's something that you could like that you want to point people in the direction of that would help the concept of discoverability?
So I think this conversation is extremely timely.
It is a huge relevant question.
And I'll just keep it at that. I think ultimately in terms of discoverability, kind of going down the same path of what Robert was mentioning about the street team is just kind of bringing the human element back to music, right? So that being said, we'll probably have to have another follow-up question because there's definitely stuff in the works that's a little bit outside of PNWK that we hope will, not only benefit the DIY scene, but, music at large. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like that. I like the mystery. I like that I had enough of a pretense. I gave you the trailer for it, and you were able to not bite on it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, let's just say, like, we agree 100% with everything you just said. Like,
okay, cool.
That sort of piece, that discoverability piece, that organic discoverability piece of something that is truly you, because I mean, I don't want to rail on algorithms for an hour, but
we can.
Basically algorithms are a beautiful invention that unfortunately the side effect has sort of made everything, like it shows us what is obviously good, which is awesome because we're constantly exposed to good stuff, but it has really lost that personal touch of feeling like, hey, I'm discovering something that I, even at a subconscious level, don't know that I would like. We have lost that, right? And like, there are so many bands that I love to my core that I guarantee you today I would have never discovered if I relied entirely on algorithms, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like all of the Kung Fu Records roster would never be exposed to me via an algorithm.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Yeah, and I love nearly every band that's ever passed through Kung Fu Records. But it's like, that's exactly what we're talking about. And we are, while PNWK to us is solving the problem of like, hey, how do we support DIY artists in a way that is artist friendly so that they don't give up, burn out, or just can't make a living doing this? Like, PNWK is solving that problem right now, which is beautiful and we love it and everything. But the street team stuff that we're doing is discovering the awareness, the growth problem, the marketing problem that bands have at that stage of like, how do you get people in the middle of nowhere to come out to your show? How do you get them exposed to your music before you show up in town? Like, we're trying to solve that problem with that. On the other side, on the development side, the big swings, the big problem solvings, we are working on some really big stuff that we're excited to announce in the future that we hope solves exactly what you're talking about.
I'm really fascinated by that because I think that coming from like a dev to a dev, like I know that y'all want to build stuff, and building this, I feel like maybe was a test for you for this whatever grander thing. That's my thing. I sense y'all are hungry to do more.
Oh, we are. You have no idea.
You nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, was the record label the test run?
It's not a test run because a test run implies it's throwaway. Like PNWK.
True. No, it's not a test run.
PNWK solves a specific problem, and we want to continue solving that problem, right?
Yeah.
And it is just one part of a larger problem, which is basically how do we make the music industry not a piece of shit?
Yeah.
Because right now it is, unfortunately. There are amazing people who are well-intentioned and extremely talented that make up the base and the foundation of the music industry. They're awesome, right? The bands, the booking agents, the promoters, the people who are out there making music happen, they're incredible. But there's this whole top layer that is entirely driven by capitalism and money and all of that, which, I'm not here to rally against making money because it's essential to continue to make music, but we want to build a way that sort of allows the music industry to be a little bit more pure and about the creation of stuff and not just the extreme profit generation of stuff. And I think we have a chance to do that because I think, honestly, I don't want to speak on behalf of every music listener in the world, but I think we're kind of sick of it. I think we're kind of sick of being exploited for the things that we love, and we would rather support directly the things that we love to allow it to exist without any of the extra stuff. And that's what we're trying.
I vibe with that. I vibe with that 1,000,000%. And I'm not going to press y'all. Y'all, honestly, I think you guys, you almost probably gave me too much. And so like, I'm not even going to press on this, but I'm gonna kind of talk about this thing that I was talking with my wife about yesterday about, we were talking about what the exhaustion, where the exhaustion kind of lives in promotion and even just social media in general. Something that I found is that there's kind of this, there are three things. There's, I have to tell people, and like, or the way you find something is you were either told, you were shown, or you found. Those are the three ways of like finding something new, or being told something new, or you were shown something new. And I think like technically the three things that you do on a phone are reading, and listening, and looking. That's kind of like the only three things. So it's like, how do I take those three things and make it so that like I'm either a lot of the algorithm thing is people are just trying to show you what you want, or they're trying to tell you what you want rather than like seeing what you actually want. And so there's a lot of like weird stuff that's kind of happening when it comes to that part of discoverability. And so it's really exciting to see y'all not like use this time to say, okay, cool, we put our left foot down into this, the label world, and there's this, right foot that's in like a completely different doorway that is all going to be this interconnected stuff. So it's again, the last year or so has been, watching y'all kind of be this disruptor, where, almost like a SaaS disruptor, but for the DIY music scene. It's been absolutely fascinating to watch. What would you say is like, what are the harder things that you've learned over the last year?
I think for me, it's probably to just not doubt yourself. Right. And I think we do a pretty good job of not doing that. But I think, early on, there's this like when you start getting a little bit of success, and I have this talk with our bands a lot, is the moment you start getting a little bit of success, you start getting a little bit of that validation, and people start realizing that what you're doing is really special. That is the most dangerous part of your career. Because you're going to get a lot of people flooding into you that may not align with your ethos or your goal or your agenda or what you want. But that's hard to tell in the moment because you're kind of in this euphoria of like, oh my gosh, like, you're getting all this validation. And like, for most people, they have not got that yet. Right. It's like, hey, I was kind of writing music and I was recording music to nobody. And I was hoping that there was somebody out there who felt the way I felt. And the moment you feel and realize that there are more people out there that love what you're doing, you're sort of distracted by that for a brief moment. And that is the moment where somebody can come in and really put you on the wrong trajectory, right? And like a prime example of that, and I probably won't name names because, you know, it's just not cool.
No, totally.
But, you know, so early on, you know, we got a lot of traction. And we're putting out some, you know, killer records. And I love everything that we're doing. And luckily, there are other people who are loving what we're doing. And because of that, we were getting on a lot of people's radar, right? And we had, you know, some major labels come to us and be like, oh, we love what you're doing and we love these bands and like we'd love to support you and whatever. Now, luckily, we are mature, experienced people and we understand that the word support, when it comes from somebody who's not aligned with your ethos and agenda, can mean something than what it means when we say it, right? And so we just had to have a frank conversation and say, listen, if by support what you want to do is give us or our band's debt, we're not interested.
Sure.
Because we cover 100% of everything for our bands. We don't need your money, but we would love your reach and your distribution or your support in other ways that does not make us indebted to you, right? And so I say all that because like the learning lessons early on is just learning not to take something that feels really good in the moment, but doesn't align with your long-term goals. And that's something you just sort of need to figure out. And like, so for us, like we really had to fall back on our mantra and what we say to our bands all the time, which is we are currently in a marathon. We're not in a sprint. Like it does not behoove us to just flood the market with everything that we can do. Let's just do what we want to do and make sure we do it really, really well. And so that's what we've been focusing on. And the other thing that is hard is resisting that urge to scale.
Yeah,
because
1,000,000%.
Yeah, we are a 2-person label, and we have decided, which was a hard decision to make, that we want to forever remain a 2-person label.
Sure.
We do not want to build out a big team. We do not want to create this crazy overhead. We do not want to jeopardize our ability to continue to be very personal and hands-on with every single band we work with, which means we're not able to sign or retain every single artist we love. And that sucks, right? Because in a perfect world, I would love to fund every record that I think is going to be incredible. And right now we have like 5 unreleased records being pitched to us sitting in our inboxes that like, while I would love to sign them and release it, we have decided that we want to always give every single band the exact same treatment. And that doesn't mean the same budget, right? It does mean that, but it's not, it's more about that personal connection. Because right now, and please ask any band on the label, they could call us, they can text us at any moment of the day, any moment of the night, and they know that they're going to get a response as quickly as we're able to give them one. And because that's the sort of hands-on approach that we've decided we want to take as a label. We want to be there no matter what our band needs, no matter when they need it. And we can only do that with a finite amount of bands because we're 2 people. We have kids. We have lives. We have work we have to get done.
And, you know, I don't think we ever explicitly mentioned this, and our bands know this, but we self-fund everything. So we, you know, bust our butts, do our day jobs. Again, Robert said we take care of ourselves, take care of our family, and then we take care of our bands, which is an extension of that, right?
Sure.
So that's why we say we don't take loans, we don't do this because we only have a finite amount of resources, right, in terms of time and money. And we just want to make sure that we are extremely mindful about it.
And so that's been hard. So like, you know, a few people might notice that, you know, there are 2 fewer bands on our label than there was a month ago.
Mhm.
And that's a hard thing because, we had to realize that we can't infinitely grow and we can't reach beyond our means if we want to keep the quality as high as it is in terms of like making sure that we are respecting our artists by giving them what they need when they need it, respecting our fans by making sure that, hey, if you order a vinyl, if you order a shirt, if you order anything to show support from our bands, you're going to get it in the highest quality and you're going to get it as quick as possible. And there's not going to be any issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you sort of maintain that trust and that quality and that respect for your artists and your fans and everybody that you work with is by making sure that you are setting boundaries and protecting the quality and the approach that you believe in.
I agree. I think that, I like the bringing up the scale thing just kind of shows like the worlds that we live in where like that is usually rule number one, scale. That's it. It's get big, and then it's like one of the models is like, okay, cool. I'm gonna start a thing, scale, get big enough, get eaten, paycheck. Let's get the fuck out. And that's usually the model that of like the places that I work in. I've been working in like SaaS my whole life. So it's nice to hear like that. Hey, to go away from that and to stay personal is really important. What would you say is the best way to describe the difference between your ethos as a record label to other record labels, where like this would be part of like your pitch of like, hey, you're going to expect this from this person, expect from this from this. This is what you can expect from PNWK.
Yeah, that's a great question because I think the fact that we don't ask ourselves that question and we don't pitch ourselves that way is the answer.
I get that.
We really don't, and I don't mean this in like a malicious way,
Mm-hmm.
but we really don't care what other people are doing.
Sure.
It does not influence us at all because there are record labels that do not even, they're there just to make sure you put out a record. They don't get involved in your live shows. They don't get involved in your touring. They don't get involved in anything other than the product that they make money on,
Mm-hmm.
right? No shame to that. That's a business. They're
Mm-hmm.
running a business. We don't see ourselves as running a business because we have approached it in a very unique way that was informed by our unique life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so we cannot even compare ourselves to anybody else because it is not apples to apples. Like, yes, we're both technically record labels, but our approach is not a record label approach. Our approach is not even a for-profit business approach
Mm-hmm.
because, we have taken how we build games and brought it to music.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm making a game, and I've made some large games in my time, I will be spending $50 to $100 million on a game, developing a game before I ever see a penny back to recoup that.
Sure.
But I know that if I spend the right amount of money and I do the right things, then that game is going to make more money than I spent by a large margin, which will allow me to continue to take big swings and make big games. Now, when we're talking about music, we're obviously, especially DIY music, we're talking about much, much, much smaller numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the principle in my mind is the same, is we come at it as like, hey, we're going to invest in you in every way that matters, right? So like making sure that we're recording exactly what you envisioned with the people you envisioned it with. You are putting it out in a way that respects your music, and we are going to invest in that. And we're going to make sure that you are not at risk. So the band is only making money. They cannot lose money.
Mm-hmm.
We will lose money for the first several years of a band signing to the label.
Sure.
Because that's an investment. That's what it takes to do it the right way and allow everything to be focused on the creative and not on the business. Because, I'm sure you create a lot of stuff. A lot of people who listen to your podcast are probably creative people who create stuff, and they will relate to this. as a creative, you need to be making decisions based on the creative, not on the business, right?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Like, my band, when we were doing stuff, like in the beginning, we were getting pitched from stuff, and there was a lot of like, oh, I've got to, first of all, people have to decide it on an ethos anyways. And so like everyone's trying to find like where their ethos align with others. And so as long as you come in from it in a positive way, that's usually the way that, that's how the good stuff comes about.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, everybody we talk to, like the number one question they ask us is, how do you make money?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is we don't by design. And we don't plan to for a while. And so no other label can compete with us because they are running a business and they rely on those sales to keep the lights on and the fun stuff and whatever. And so this is our competitive advantage. And we understand that that is a privilege to be able to do that. But we are big believers in, your goal as a person should be to generate money purely for the purpose of reinvesting that money into creating more beautiful things.
Agreed.
And that is what we do. So we are not like, because people will ask us like, well, why don't you just become a nonprofit? And it's like, no, our goal is to make profit eventually so that we can continue to invest in people who cannot invest in themselves. That is it.
The investment part, I think the key difference here, because I think that in the models that kind of exist today, it's kind of a record to record based thing, which is when I grew up, I wasn't doing music until I started my 30s, and the ideas that I got from like record labels and looking back and reading about a bunch of stuff, and even the movies how many movies are about like record labels, fucking you over and things like that. And so all the big, huge labels, it's, hey, you have to do 3 records, blah, blah, blah. Here's advances, all the stuff, the things that you learn from these stories. And joining music, in the DIY space about 4 years ago, the kind of idea was, from my assumption and like kind of seeing how everything was done, is that you have a record, you finish your record, and then you pitch it to a DIY label, and they go, okay, cool, we'll put out this record. And then now you have this relationship with this one label, and they can help you or not. And it's by label basis, like, looking at Bang Quad, I think it's like their cycle has been a new record label every release. So that, it's interesting and fun to see y'all go from to kind of an older model to say, hey, we want to invest in you for, not just at one album cycle, but like we want to invest in you outside of the album cycle, but for as long as you're willing to be on the label with whatever our stipulations are. That's cool. That's interesting and different. And again, part of that sine wave of everything kind of getting back to a different time.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, I really don't have an interest, not to say that anything's off the table, because we are putting out that Kerosene Height Leaving EP for them. And that is a one-off thing to help them, because, they have things going on. But generally, when we sign a band, our goal is to work with that band forever. And just because that's our goal doesn't mean we contractually force them to do that, right? Like, we will let a band leave the label anytime the band wants to leave a label, because if you want to leave a label for any reason, then you shouldn't be on that label. Forcing you contractually does not make the relationship better. And our goal is that, hey, if we treat everybody well, and we say this a lot as well. We're big on sayings around here, but rising tides lift all ships is really the approach that we take. Is like, hey, we're in this together, all of us, for the long haul. As long as that haul makes sense for you individually, and we are going to approach how we invest in you the same way. We're not and that's true artist development. We're not just promoting a record, we are building an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that impacts their live show, that impacts their touring schedule, that impacts like the products they're putting out, that impacts the music they're writing and recording. Nothing is off limits. And I think that's a really beautiful way to sort of approach this creative endeavor.
Yeah, this is it's really nice to hear kind of like, again, this mission statement and putting this out here of like what it means to your relationship with the artist is different than a lot of labels are doing it, which is really fascinating. Again, I love the approach. I like how different and interesting it is because we get to see y'all coming into the thing. You now get to kind of A/B test like how everything works. And there's lots of eyes on y'all right now. And so I feel like your navigation through this, through those eyes, has been interesting and cool. And I'll give you guys A's on all the steps that y'all have done because y'all have been in front of the community with a lot of decisions you've made, and it's been really, really cool. Like if we want to dive into like stuff that was a very interesting thing that happened is the kind of the fall of Thumbs Up Records, and where did it come to the decision to kind of like wanting to lift that mess up and like put the fire out and help? Where did that come from inside?
Again, we are very emotionally driven people. Not to say that we aren't, tactical and logical, but it really all starts with an emotion. And I think the statement we put out sums it up really well. And I'll just, paraphrase part of it, which is we believe that when somebody falls in the pit, you pick them up.
Yeah.
We all say that. We all subscribe to that in this scene when it comes to the literal meaning of it, of like, hey, if you're at a show and somebody falls in the pit, make sure they don't get the shit stumped out of them. And what we were seeing was, unfortunately, Brady, the founder of Thumbs Up Records, he fell, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter why he fell. It doesn't matter if the fall was his fault. It doesn't matter the blame. It doesn't matter the reasons or the circumstance. The fact is that somebody who was a valued member of the scene, who was well-intentioned and put their whole selves in, and unfortunately put more than they had to put in, ran into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And that, how we looked at it is, it doesn't matter why, it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter the circumstance. That sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks for him or for them. It sucks for the scene. It sucks for the bands who were associated. And just through happenstance, totally unrelated, 3 of the bands who put out records on Thumbs Up are now PNWK bands. Tiny
Yes.
Voices, M-Way, Aren't We Amphibians? All 3 of them are now on the label.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anybody caring about any baggage that comes from the past when they're thinking about new music, right? We're about to put out the debut LP from Aren't We Amphibians, which is going to be an incredible record. We're writing new music with M-Way. When that stuff drops, I don't want somebody worrying about like, wait, didn't I already buy a record from them and it never showed up?
Sure.
It's like, yeah, that happened. So instead of letting that baggage just linger, because like to me, it's a festering wound, right? It's like it hurts everybody around it and it's bad for the scene. And then so I'm like, hey, if we are going to believe in that ethos that if somebody falls, you pick them up, then let's live by that ethos. Outside the pit, inside the pit. And so at its core, that was really the motivating factor of wanting to reach out. And so we just reached out. We asked Brady, hey, do you want some help on this?
Yeah.
And the goal is not to make money because, spoiler, we're not making money. We are losing money on that deal. It was not a business decision because we're going to cover, we already have covered. He's issuing them now. They're issuing them now. But we covered all the costs of the refunds to make sure that anybody who ordered a record is made whole.
Mhm.
And we've acquired all that backstock inventory with the goal to, make sure that the bands have the option to get it. They don't have to take it. Some of them are not in a position that they can even take it. So we might lose more money on that inventory, but the goal was to just level set.
Yeah.
And as I told Brady in private, like, I believe in them. I believe that, this was a misstep, but if they have a chance to sort of rest and recover and get re-inspired, that they have a future in this scene that is going to be inspiring to all of us. But that will not be possible if they have this baggage. So to me, I feel like it's an investment in the unknown future of the scene in a way that may or may not come to reality. And that's okay with me.
I think that that's a really, really good way of like putting it, because it's like, there's kind of the wound is a really, really good way of describing it, because it was in the back of people's minds, where like I think that there is the collective conscious of the community is I told my wife about the whole thing, about everything that kind of happened, and like, because it's sometimes there's drama in the DIY scene, and like it's like sometimes it's unapologetically juicy, just like what happened with Thumbs Up Records. It's a wild thing that happened, and it like is kind of newsworthy in my family. So I'm telling my wife about everything, and she goes, "Well, why didn't anybody do a chargeback? Why didn't everything's probably through PayPal? Why didn't anybody just like after a couple of weeks just like, all right, well, I'm not going to get it. Give me a refund." And it was because I think that immediately my thought was, wow, everyone is probably like, well, maybe I'll get it later. Maybe they're busy. There's still like this assumption from audience to DIY band that they're either going through something, and that either they're okay with eating it, or there's this thing that the audience of DIY music still believes in all these things that are happening. And so by y'all doing this, you kind of tapped into kind of strangely what the audience expects. And so you should be commended for that. So like, big fucking round of applause. Like y'all did that. And it was kind of a, in a place where there isn't a lot of like expected help in those kind of situations. Y'all really stepped in, and that was really cool. Just want to make sure that y'all knew that from me. Like that was really fucking cool.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it. And I think you touched on something that is really meaningful, which is, there is no expectation of help.
Mm-hmm.
There is no entitlement in this scene that anyone is going to come lift any of us up.
Yep.
So when it does happen, it's invigorating, and it helps us, it motivates us to keep going. And that, I think, is the biggest reward of all of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that in a drought of everyone just kind of just pushing forward and trying and hearing bad news and GoFundMe's for car things, and it's just, again, there can be, and these group of people, this audience is okay with dealing with bad news, and maybe used to bad news. So to have like such a big shiny good news moment, I feel like it's fueled a lot of not only great conversations, but like morale has never been higher.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, we love that. And honestly, we deserve it. And that's why we're here. Like, so a lot of the world is pretty shit. And I think we all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But, one thing that we could all agree on is like the music keeps us together. And it should be the thing that lifts us all up, as a community and as people that really love this art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like, it's just nice to see. I think that's just literally it. Everyone is going through their stuff. And right now, like, I think you're absolutely right. Like there's not just even outside of, the audience's like music lives, there's a lot of just fucking bad news just all the time. And the drought of good news is, you know, few and far between. And so to see like this big fucking thing was, I think that this thing may have helped people even outside of just being an audience member for this scene. So I definitely felt that. I definitely feel like I keep thinking about not just like the move in itself, but like y'all's moves in the space, I think has been nothing but a positive thing. And it's just cool to see people, I mean, even in my headspace, like, oh, I think that, you know, maybe we could do more. Maybe there's something we can do more. They're doing more. What else can we do to like bring it into like a cooler space? Which is another reason why I wanted to reach out to y'all anyways, because just to kind of pick your brains and you guys get a chance to talk to everyone about your thought processes and everything. So that is also kind of the whole thing. You answered all of my questions. Thank you so much just for coming on. Is there anything else y'all want to kind of tell everybody?
Oh man. No, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for thinking about us and reaching out and giving us a chance to talk, because like, you know, while PNWK is out there making moves, trying to make things better, trying to support people that we love, like Sam and I aren't really public facing. Like we don't like, we sort of speak as one voice, and that voice is PNWK, and you never know really who's talking, whether it's me or Sam, but it's always one of us. So it's kind of fun and unique to sort of come on here and speak as us, because it's not really how we do things, but we appreciate the opportunity. You know, the only thing I will say is a selfless self-promotion, which is go please listen to the Tiny Voices album.
She gets older, she won't coast through her life, try to hide from deciding, reflect on my mistakes, help her to learn how
y'all, thank you so much for coming on. Just have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
All right,
for
we'll talk to y'all
joining.
soon.